everyone, and welcome to the Max Potential podcast. Each week, we chat with leaders, innovators, and visionaries who share their secrets to success. Max Potential is your go-to resource for actionable insights and inspiring stories. Today with me, I have Chauncey Pelzer, who is the CEO and founder of Defining Destiny Coaching and Consulting and the Light Mastermind. Welcome, Chauncey. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited.
Amazing. Can you please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, your company, and your role?
Sure. So, like you said before, I'm the CEO and founder of Defining Destiny Coaching and Consulting. And really, what that is or what that means is that I feel like our destinies are pretty much already defined, like it's out there. It's just up to us to go ahead and try to figure out what does that mean. So, what do we feel like we're purposed to do in life? What do we feel like is our major contribution while we're here? We're obviously here on purpose. So, that's what defining destiny is. It's us being able to kind of tap into self-awareness and self-intuition and figure out what our next steps are and what we're moving towards.
Very, very cool. And the name seems very appropriate.
Thank you.
Love it. So I always like to ask guests when they come on, what was your first job ever? And was there one thing that you learned from that job that you use today?
So my first job ever was Chick-fil-A. I was a Chick-fil-Aer, as they call it. And so everything that you can imagine, I did. Um, I think I started when I was 14. So at the tender age of 14, my parents were like, yeah, it's about time, right? So, one of the things I think I definitely learned from Chick-fil-A was customer service. Number one, it was definitely hard work too, hard work because, you got to do all the various areas, but then also customer service definitely because it's more or less, everything that is said or done is my pleasure to do that, so on and so forth. And you really find a way. At first, you're just saying it, right? But then once it kind of becomes ingrained in you, you realize, you know what? I'm here to do a service for other people. I want to do that to the best of my ability. And that kind of has translated over the jobs and just different functions, community service, anything that I've done, it really is, I'm doing something that I want to be doing. So I think that's what I learned from them. And hard work, like I said, those
I
people,
get,
they were hard.
I could definitely relate to that. I worked in a candy store, and so it was a similar thing. It's a lot of work, but being nice to your customers is hugely important and can make a huge difference.
Right.
Um, what did you want to be when you were a kid, and do you do that today?
Ah, I could probably laugh so hard at that. Okay, what did I want to be as a kid? I remember telling my dad that I wanted to be a Supreme Court justice when I was like before I was 5 years old. And yes, I did. I was like, I want to be a Supreme Court justice, and my dad was like, okay, all right, So he's always tried to push a law degree like forever. That clearly did not happen. I mean, I had a moment for 2 seconds where in college I remember talking to because my business law class was pretty good. I majored in business, and I talked to my business law teacher, professor, and she was like, "If you don't really want a law degree, like, do not go." She was like, "I almost didn't make it out, and I really wanted this," and I was like, "That's enough for me. I'll be good." Nope. So yeah, clearly, I ended up in human resources. So I did a short stint in sales, which is kind of a little bit like human resources because you deal with a lot of people. And then that's when I transferred over to recruiting and then HR, and I've done HR ever since. And that kind of formed the grounds for me coming
Mm,
up.
come into your own business and do coaching yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I was doing on a, daily basis. People would come, to my desk, always asking for advice, asking for advice on everything, honestly. Anything from family to what's my next career move. This could be coworkers, this could be just another employee saying, well, what do you think my next step is? Or do you think I should work for this person? And here I am throwing it back like, well, do you want to work for this person? Do you think this is a good step for you? So once I started learning all those questions, and it's so funny because life always kind of pushes you into what it is your next step is. And
Mhm.
here I am thinking, get away from me, people. I'm trying to do my work. It's too much going on. You're always asking me questions. Why? I just want to do my process and procedure, right? But the big part of my job, all my jobs, especially when I was a generalist, was to talk to the people, to, interact with the people, understand, coach, give feedback. And I just found out that I was really good at it. And I said, well, why don't I move into doing this for myself? And the fun thing about doing it for yourself is you don't just have to kind of say what the company wants you to say. You
Mm,
actually say what you really feel, which for me can be interesting sometimes. So, because I always like to make sure that the person is doing the best thing for themselves. And sometimes that's not the best thing for the company, right? There's some places that
yeah.
stay where you are, status quo, stay in this box. And, my dad was a 70s DJ, so I'm a little bit of a rebel. I'm like, something different. How do you want to do this? So it's nice to be able to do it in my own company without feeling like probably should have said that. So rebel in my own time.
I love that. I love that. And full disclosure to our listeners, I was one of those people at Chauncey's desk. And I
He
did get
definitely,
some great nuggets of advice for my career that I still use today. So,
she broke me in. We were just talking about the morning times, and Lindsay is like full throttle, and I am not. I am very. I warm up. I go this way. I have to kind of see what I'm doing. A little meditation. Figure out. Get your coffee, get your stuff started, and then I warm up. But there's advantages to either way. So Lindsay has showed me a different side of the sun, shall I say?
yes, yes. And one more thought on that. I do remember you saying one piece of advice that stuck with me was if you make it a big deal, it's going to be a big deal.
That's in other words, it's gonna be wild if you want it to be wild, but kind of taper it back. Yeah.
Paper it back and like think about like, is this the thing that you want to die on a sword with, right? Like, is this truly the thing you want to be going to bat for? I always took it kind of that kind of way. And I try to run scenarios through my head sometimes in that and think through that framework of like, is this really the thing? Not everything is the thing.
Not
So
everything is a thing, and sometimes it is a thing, and that's the time where we'd also say, "Okay, time to wave the flag. Let's do
yeah,
this. We're gonna dig down.
we're going in.
We're going in." Here comes the. We had little nicknames for each other. I think she was what operational risk control. So when
Yeah.
she was in it to win it, let me tell you. But every everything wasn't like that, and so I think I kind of still use that advice definitely for myself and my clients, because if you throw your full energy at everything,
Yes.
everything gets overwhelming. You approach burnout very quickly, and really, that's what my business is doing, is coaching people kind of back from that burnout, especially women, because there's not a lot of, I don't know if there's any resources that are telling people, hey, scale back, hold on, let's look at what you really want to be focused on. Don't focus on everything. Let's try to do, one thing at a time. If anything, it's about hustle culture, and we know that leads to burnout. So,
Yeah, those are really good points. And I feel like I have found if I focus on everything, I get some things done, but
yes.
I don't get that big thing that I really want to get done, right?
Yeah.
And it's like if
Yeah.
you just kind of focus on the big one thing, you can move that forward. And then I find all those other things somehow some fall into place one way or another, as in they were never important enough to do anyway,
Exactly.
or you figure out a way to get them done because you're so excited by the momentum of what you're doing with the big thing. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
right? But
We were
taking
taught,
that pause to like reset is hugely important, I think.
and that's the biggest thing for me. I think that I don't know if you ever get a chance to reset unless you do it for yourself, especially in your adult years. When you're growing up, it's one thing with your parents. Thankfully, my parents were great at saying, "Hey, you're doing too much. I need you to scale back so that grades don't slip, and so on and so forth." So, like I mentioned, I had that job, and they were like, "Okay, there'll be time for the real world, but you need to also do, grades and things like that." So, but after that, you really don't have that type of guidance, right? After
Yeah.
college, and then, especially in the working world, it's like, okay, now it's time to go full throttle all the time. And then for women, especially when you think about, the leading cause of death for women, being heart disease and, heart attacks, it's like, okay, there has to be a give some way. I think that when you have different values and you realize you have to come to a point where you realize what your values are and you have
Mm.
to put yourself somewhere in those values because if you don't, we're giving to everybody. We're giving to our family. We're giving to our job. We're giving to everybody and everything. And then we're last and we don't have anything left and we're exhausted. And
Yep.
so that's just not a place where you can really operate from. That's not really your greatest potential at all.
No, I completely agree, and that's a lot of what we think about here over at Max Potential is um thinking, do you even know what your values are?
Yes.
Right? I
Yes.
it, for the longest time, if you asked me what my values are, I'd be like, I could tell you maybe what my mom or my dad or work or like, right? But it was like, what is truly important for me? And then once you get clear on that, I do feel like it does make it easier to have a framework to make decisions on. Um,
Absolutely.
because there's so much noise and things to say yes to these days.
Mhm.
Like it
And
helps
everybody's
with
looking
that.
for that yes. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Which kind of leads us into one of my questions I had for you today, Chauncey, is that do you have a set of values and a vision for your current life and career? And if so, what are those?
Mhm. So my values at first used to be something totally different. I thought it was be the best that I can be in all the areas, right? But then, like I said, when I also approached burnout, and I want to clear up the definition of burnout because a lot of times people think burnout is I've just done too much, but it's a series of stressful events that you go through, and after a while, it's event after event after event and your body, your mind, mentally and emotionally, you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. So you're not able to really, go like you could because you're burnt out. But after going through that, I realized that my first priority, and I'm a religious person, so God is definitely my first priority. I love going to church. I love getting invested in the community, doing whatever I can to kind of show. I feel like He kind of gave us each individual a light, right? That we want to kind
Mm.
of shine to the world. And if we don't share a piece of ourselves, then nobody gets to see what that light is, right? So
Yeah.
God and representing God. Then after God, honestly, it's myself now. It was never that before. Before it would be my family, right?
Hmm.
And the reason that I say myself is, like they say, if you don't fill your own cup first. And I
Yes.
noticed that what I was doing was I was checking off all the things, but my stuff was last. And I couldn't even, by the time I got to my stuff, I didn't even know what my stuff was. I was like, what am I doing? What am I supposed to do? And I think, once you certainly become a mom, I became a mom later on in life. But once you become a mom, once you become a wife, and you don't have to be a wife still, society just kind of looks for women to do all of it, do all of the things.
Yes.
Even, companies, what they ask the men to do versus what they ask the women to do can be sort of, different, right?
Yep.
And the they can be different too. So, so like I said, God first, myself next, because I have to make sure that I'm doing those things that I'm called to do first. And then after that would be my family. And then after that would be like my business, the community, so on and so forth. So that would be, kind of the order that I would say as far as my values. And then the second question, remind me again, it was
A vision for your life.
a vision for my life. Okay. So now my vision is much, much clearer than what it was. Before, like I said, it used to be because that's what we're taught, right? Do the best you can do in all the areas. Whatever the areas are, you do the best. If you're in school, you make the A's. If you are whatever, you're at the top of what top echelon or whatever. And now more so it is what do I find the most value and meaning in for me? And for right now, and because it changes, right? But
Yeah.
my thing for me is to create what I call a peaceful life, first of all, where um, you're not everywhere at one time, you're not frazzled. And even when you are frazzled, the biggest portion is how do I scale back from that and how do I reel my own self in without hitting burnout? So my vision is to create a peaceful life where I can, like I said, keep God first. also make sure I understand what's important to me at the time and work on complete those. You're not going to complete it all at one time. You're just not. We always come up with these fantastic lists, and those lists can get you in trouble because you want to do all of it. But like we talked about, one at a time. And then also, how can I just be more true and authentic to myself? What do I feel is
Mm,
the most important thing for me, and how can I accomplish that? And then moving on to the next. And then some seasons, right? Being able to shift, being able to say, okay, well, you know what? Um, like when I had was a mother of a newborn, guess what? That newborn is pretty much top priority, right? Everything else
yes.
has to die out to the wayside. And you just realize that at the time. And then, as they get more older and independent, you can shift again and say, okay, now what was I doing before I did all that? You know, so my vision is, like I said, peaceful for me is making sure that I'm able to be authentic. I'm able to be doing activities I really want to do, right? Um, like Lindsay said, we met in corporate America, and actually I transitioned out of that. I did corporate. I did city municipal government for a short stint, probably about 3 years. And then after that, I switched to my own thing. But it's knowing what it is that you want. Liz is in a great job, Liz. But for me, the job that I was in, I was like, okay, I've been there before. I've done this rodeo. For me, it was more important for me at that time to, especially during COVID, to be able to come home and care for my own kid than being in a conference room talking about something I didn't want to talk about, right?
Hmm.
Because I've done that for almost 20 years. And so it was refreshing finally to be able to work on what I thought was important to me, and helping those that I felt like needed the type of help I could provide. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
I love that. And I love that you talk about the seasons of change. I feel like we often, think things are like you have to do everything right away and right now. And the idea that, I feel like as a new mom too, when I was going through those things, I had a lot of pressure on myself
Oh,
to get things done. And it really, once I kind of just let that go, and I wish, I could go back and tell myself to let it go even further.
but you
That this is
don't know. You don't know.
right. Yeah, but that this is just a season, and that you're gonna have a moment again down the road to do more things because it is, I've heard a lot about like, we've kind of were sold this thing, at least I think when we were younger girls, like you can have it all, you can do it all.
Absolutely.
And I have more and more understanding now that's like you can have it all and do it all, but it may not all be at the exact same time.
Exactly.
Right? So and understanding that that can be okay. Right? So that's a huge, I think, lesson to learn, and it doesn't have to just apply to women, but I do feel like when you hit those moments of having, a kid or there's major shift like that, it really becomes highlighted that you cannot do everything. So,
Yeah, yeah. And I think having a kid forces you to kind of slow down anyway. Even if
yes.
it wasn't your, because I know new moms, and I'm putting myself in this category where you're thinking, okay, well, I'm going to have a kid. Yes, this is an adjustment to my life. But for the most part, I'm thinking I'll still be able to kind of do things like I normally do them. And you're like, whoa, especially for me, because we had my daughter January 2020, and March 2020, the whole world shut down. And so it was like, well, what is being a normal mom from that period? I had
Oh my
no
god.
idea. Right. I didn't know what it was to be a mom, and I didn't know what it was to be a normal mom because I was a COVID mom, right?
Oh
So
my god.
that was like, and so the slowing down and then versus just the stopping. But then I was also, still working in city government. So it was like stop, start, and it just came to a point where, you shouldn't have to choose, I don't think, unless you want to. But you have to kind of go with circumstances. And if the circumstances look like you have to choose, now that I'm here I mean, she's 4 now at this point, and I would make that choice that I made every time. I'm so glad that I had the time that I had because I don't know if I would be as satisfied. I mean, she goes to kindergarten next year, and I'm like, okay, great. But I've been able to spend some time with her that I really felt like was necessary. And, and I feel good not regretting that because once it's gone, right? I can't redo it. So, I'm kind of glad that I made the decision I made, because I really feel like I would have lost. I feel like I lost time anyway because of COVID. I think everybody does. but
Yes.
I feel like I really would have lost like the little time that I had. So, I'm grateful that, things transpired the way they did. Not grateful for COVID, but we made it out all right.
Yeah. Yeah. COVID was definitely an interesting time. I feel like a lot of people I talked to are like, we can't remember that 2 year period.
It's like a blank. Like I literally feel like a blank. And then next thing you know, I have nieces that were children and now they're like 15 and 16. People are driving. And I'm like, what just happened? I don't
Yes.
know what happened. The
Yes.
more, be having a newborn, I'm like, I really don't know. I think I don't know. I guess that just goes to show you if you kind of take everybody off their routine and their time, it's just kind of like, we're kind of like fish out of water. Like, what do we do? But also that was the time when people really started to decide, what was best for them and what was more important. And I was in that. And honestly, I can't tell you that had that not happened, I don't think that I would have thought as severely as I did at that time. It really made me think like, do I want to do this like this, or is there a way that I feel more comfortable? So I think that kind of gave me. I was scared to death at the time, but it gave me courage afterwards. And I feel a lot more liberated that I made this.
I think a lot of people did take a step back, and I think sometimes the answers surprised people of what
Mhm.
came out of that. I feel like I saw some people really make some big life changes after that in different ways, and in all with kind of like the idea of like, what do I want from life?
Yes,
Right? Answering that question, and that can be different for everybody, you know.
absolutely.
So
Mhm.
it's I think it was the upside of that time, silver lining is that I think it did give people time to kind of really reflect and maybe come out with a different outcome of their life, which is, um, I always think it's always good. Like you were saying earlier that values change, but like what you want out of life changes too over the years, and we don't have
Absolutely.
to be so rigid. We can be open. I think in terms of taking some time to pause at each kind of stage of life and say, okay, what really matters here, and how do I want to show up to this
Mhm.
time in my life that works for me. And I think learning how to ask those questions of yourself is like hugely important too. So,
And that's what I work with my clients on. And a lot of people, they haven't asked themselves that in years, if
mhm.
ever. So, at first it's really startling for someone to say, "Hey, what is it that you need right now? What is it that you want?" And they're like, "You're asking me?" I'm like, "Yeah,
You're
you."
like,
Yeah. They're like, "You're asking me?" Nobody asked me that. If anything, they just tell me to, hurry up, keep going, let's go, let's.
yeah,
So I love that shock factor. It's a good shock factor.
yeah. I was going to ask you today, as a part of the questions, is to tell me about a time you took a risk and it paid off. I
Oh,
feel
I
like
forgot.
I
Man,
feel like you just kind of answered that question, but if you had anything else in mind, I always love to hear. I think a lot of the most successful people have had to take a lot of risks. And
mhm,
it's maybe something that's less talked about that it is, taking a risk can be difficult. When you're on the other side of it and everything's all rosy and everything looks great, it's like, oh, it worked out for you, right? But along the journey, there are moments where, you really have to take a hard look at your life and make a completely different decision,
mhm,
and then if you make it or not is kind of, I think, sometimes a big indicator of whether you're going to be successful in life. Because I found too, it's not just once that you potentially have to do this, it's more
okay,
than once you have to potentially do this. And so if
yes,
you can learn that skill, then you can continue to evolve yourself. So, do you have
absolutely.
any other examples or things that you think might be helpful for our listeners?
You know what? It's so funny. I had something right in my head that was really good, and then right when you said that, I was like, now what was that? But I think that when you take the chance, because I think so often we spend a lot of time on should I should, and we try to weigh all the pieces, right? Okay, well, I think I should because of this. Well, I don't want to upset that. And then on top of that, it's the pressure of you have your peers, right? So we're not in high school anymore. It's not, people by the lockers, but you have coworkers, you have people that your friends, you have your family. I think that's added pressure too, because they are looking at what you're doing. And sometimes, if you made the choice or decision, then a lot of times you get a lot of comments, right? Well, I had crazy comments when I was leaving because I remember people saying, "Well, I don't even like my kids that much to stay home," and just craziness. And I'm like, okay, well, you don't like your kid, but I waited a while to get mine. I want my child. So, and I really, it's hard not to engage. Or, my favorite, I remember somebody said, well, me and my husband, we definitely have goals. And I'm like, I don't, like, I'm not understanding. But it's just funny how people kind of project their thoughts on,
Yes.
and you have to kind of stay strong in that effort. So, number one, like you said, is making the decision, right? Because
Yep.
it's so easy to go back and forth, and you can do that forever. You can do that for
Years.
years. Um, yeah,
Years.
and two, after you make the decision, being strong in your standpoint and not trying to explain it to everybody. I learned this through a lot of therapy, right? Because you don't have to explain your position to anybody. Like they always say,
Yep.
no is a complete sentence, or how you feel is how you feel. Because truth be told, nobody's going to understand your vision except for you.
Yes.
Whatever God gave you to understand, or whatever your light is, nobody's going to really get that except for you, and that's okay. Because you want to be able to be free, like you said, to be flexible and give yourself that space. I think so often we try to keep ourselves in this box, and it's like, okay, we're
Yes.
not in the box, so we're doing something wrong. And actually, if you kind of dance outside the box a little bit, you might get closer to something that makes you happy. I think people a lot of times think, and I did too, right, that vacations can cure, this the thing, right? I want something more, but I don't, if I go on a different vacation, or if I try this different hobby, or and after a while you run out of stuff to try, and you really realize I'm really not doing what I want to do on a daily basis. So how can I do that? That is what, I work with my clients on, because it just feels better when you are flexible, like you said. So yeah, if I add anything.
I think that's such a powerful thing because I think there's a lot of perception. We live in a very materialistic world.
Yeah.
And the answer for me, I feel like for a long time was always like, well, we'll go on like you're saying, like we'll go on vacation, I'll have a glass of wine, or I'll just get this new car, or I'll get some cool clothes. And at some point, like they can only fill you up for temporary moments in time. And if you're looking for that true life satisfaction, I find that you really have to dig in and go inward as opposed to
Mhm.
outwards. And when you find that peace, but it really means detaching from like the expectation of the box. I like how you put that. Like you
Mhm.
really have to think about like, does the box work for me? What parts do? Doesn't mean all of throw the whole thing out, but it's like, what parts really work for me and what parts do I want to rethink and maybe reprioritize so that I can have that kind of, I feel like a life where you're living your, max potential, right? You're living to your best ability and you're enjoying life. And you see these people and then you see people, I always think too, you reflect, there's some people with a ton of money out there who are not satisfied in their personal life or overall. And again, all that kind of outside stuff like hits a wall no matter what. So, or at least that's what I've found in my journey of path and, looking at like, how do I make the most of my life? So,
We see celebrities every day, different people unfortunately taking their lives, and they have what we feel is the perfect life, right? They have the money, they have the time, they should be able to be happy, but it's really not found in that, like you said, the material things. And just a quick joke, I've had more than a couple of friends who, because you mentioned the wine, and I've had friends who literally have gone to the doctor because it's just a glass of wine, right? Just after work, blah blah blah. One person, I remember her doctor was like, "Yeah, your liver count is like not right. So you need to, you're doing way too much." And then another friend, same thing. She was just getting fried by, what you think is simple and something that you enjoy. But, it's almost, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's almost like drugs, right? Anything can be overindulgence, can be like, and it's the reason behind the overindulgence. It's the reason behind the self-medicating that people really don't want to take a look at. And
yes.
um, you know, the self-medication is not, it's not the answer. The answer is within yourself, but you have to ask yourself the right questions.
Yeah. Which also means stepping outside the box, which I think can
Stepping outside the box. That's kind of a Madonna thing.
Um, all right, I feel like we've gone through a lot of the questions in our conversation, but what is your biggest piece of advice or what has been something that's really, really helped your overall well-being and helped really maximize your potential that you think would be helpful for our listeners?
I think don't be afraid to be you, to be who you are. I think for a long time, just I've kind of sometimes you kind of hide a portion of your personality because you don't know if that portion is going to be accepted, or I want to make sure to do the right thing. Right, that's another therapy moment. There is no right thing. What you're doing is the right thing for you at the time. So and I mentioned that because if you need therapy, guys, please go. So um I think that once I realized that I can't, and no matter the coach I get, right, or whoever advice, it's always going to be what resonates well with you. You can go to the best therapist. That best therapist may not give you the right advice for you. You have to listen with the thought of, hey, I know myself. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. I know what I need in this moment. And even if I don't know, then I'm willing to be patient with myself and figure that out.
Mm,
And once you do that, it makes things just a whole lot easier. I think, like we keep saying, I think a lot of people try to fit in that box, and the box is like tired. I mean, it is something that you try to hit the mark, all the time, but whose mark are you really hitting? Whose box are you
mhm.
even in? So that's the time where step out the box. It's fun to, we've been taught since kindergarten, color inside the lines, but it's a little fun. Like I said, be a little rebel sometimes, and be outside that box. Color outside the lines. You might find that what it is that you really want to be doing is nowhere near what you're doing now, and that's okay. That's okay. It's scary, but it's also very gratifying once you see, like you said, the light at the end of the tunnel, or once you start, feeling that realm of, hey, this feels a lot better. And that's how I feel now. It feels a lot better to kind of dance on my playing field versus somebody else's.
I love that. I'm gonna bring away from this conversation, a little bit of my inner rebel from you.
So you got a lot of rebel. You got a lot of
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Chauncey, for being on today. Before we hop off, where can our listeners find you and more about all the great coaching and inspiration you give to people?
So you can find me on Facebook and on Instagram and on LinkedIn, all the same, Chauncey Pelzer. And nobody knows how to spell my last name. It's Pelz as in zebra, ER, German last name. But so you can find me on all those social media venues at Chauncey Pelzer. And I'll be giving tips, I'll be giving advice, and hopefully, you'll have something. And I love to have a conversation. You can also find me at www.thelightmastermind.com. That is my website. And again, like I said, I love to, if you heard anything that resonated with you, Dave, please feel free, email me. I love to know, what made an impact on people.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you, Chauncey.
You're welcome.